The wind died without warning. At the dying fire, 4 trappers grew still. Then Mark Sutton's voice cut through the silence like a blade.
Only a fool sleeps in snow.
Benjamin Hart didn't turn. He kept his eyes on the northern sky, where the first storm clouds were building like an iron wall.
You'll be frozen solid before sunrise. Move with us or die here.
Even the other trappers urged him. But Benjamin's jaw set hard.
Even the horses won't make it if we wait. Are you deaf, Hart?
I am staying. The snow isn't our enemy if you know how to use it.
Use it how? To dig your own grave.
The group broke apart. Mark turned his horse up the trail without a backward glance. The others followed, their own fear carrying them. Benjamin stood alone as the first flakes fell. The storm wall lowered over the ridge. He turned from the trail and walked toward a deep snowbank. He sank his wood-bladed shovel into the deep drift and began cutting blocks, working fast as the sky thickened overhead.
Motionless air inside packed snow stays near the freezing point, warm enough to keep a man alive.
A long time ago, an old man had shown him the trick on a ridgeline not far from here.
Silas said the cold doesn't kill. It's moving air that steals the warmth from your blood.
The wind gusted, ripping across the clearing. Benjamin kept packing, forcing the snow crystals to bind tight.
Mark laughed, but he never saw what packed snow can become when the world tries to freeze it solid.
The mound rose in the fading light, a white dome sturdy as a trapper's hut. Benjamin circled it, testing the firmness. Then he crawled through the small entrance he'd left, worming into the dark.
Now the hollowing, slow and steady. The walls must arch just right.
Outside, the storm threw its first heavy punch. The mound shuddered but held. Benjamin dug inward, carving a refuge from the enemy's own bones. The cavity grew, smooth and rounded. He struck a match and lit the stump of a candle. The glow caught the crystal walls and threw the light back at him.
The flame tells the truth. If it flickers too much, there's a draft. If it shrinks, the air is turning bad.
He wedged his pack into the small entrance, leaving a fist-sized vent high on one side. The storm found the gap and screamed through it.
Not sealed completely. Seal it tight and you sleep under ice. The old rule. Let the air move just enough to breathe.
He sat back against the cold wall. The candle burned perfectly upright. No draft stirred. The pocket of still air held. On the mountain trail, Mark Sutton was not inside. He was leaning into the blizzard, his horse staggering sideways with every gust.
Keep moving. The town's only 5 miles further. Lie if you have to, but keep their feet moving.
But the storm answered him with a solid wall of snow that ripped the breath from his lungs and buried the trail in a single breath behind Mark. One of the trappers was already lagging. His silhouette flickered once in the whiteout, and then was gone. Inside the Quingy, Benjamin heard the mountain groan. The ground trembled. The candle flame never moved, but the deep roar told him the world outside had gone blind. A tremor passed through the packed snow, then a thin blade of cold sliced across the back of his neck.
Moving air. The thief.
He dropped to his knees, pressing a bare hand against the snow. The crack was barely a finger's width, but cold poured through like water from a broken canteen.
Silas taught him, even a pinhole could bleed enough heat to kill. Seal it with slurry, then pack it tight.
He scraped loose snow from the floor, spat into it, and worked the slurry into the gap until it froze solid. The draft vanished, but so had the feeling in his fingers. 3 miles up the trail, the last man behind Mark collapsed into a drift, his legs refusing another step. The storm erased everything behind him.
Charles, answer me, Charles.
The wind ripped the name away before it left his lips. He turned full circle and found nothing but white. Mark Sutton pressed forward alone, the false lights of town shimmering somewhere in his mind, but nowhere on the frozen waste. Inside the Quingy, Benjamin pressed his numb hands into his coat and listened. The roar had steadied. The shelter still held. But outside, the mountain had already claimed one man, and it was not done. The hours crawled. Benjamin kept his eyes on the candle flame. It never wavered.
Dead air. The thief has been locked outside.
A memory surfaced. A ridgeline in spring, an old man drawing shapes in the snow.
You see, Ben, the snow wants to be a blanket. You just have to let it.
They won't listen to you, Silas. They'll say it's just Indian talk.
The snow does not care what men think. It only obeys its own nature.
Now, buried in the white, Benjamin understood the bitter cost of that ignorance.
The town ran him off. Mark jeered loudest that day, and now Mark is out there in the storm.
3 miles up the trail, Mark Sutton stumbled, his horse dead beneath the snow. A faint glimmer pulled him forward.
The candle burned on. Benjamin closed his eyes. He owed Silas more than a memory.
Mark Sutton staggered through the blind, white world. He cursed Benjamin's name with every frozen breath.
You'll be dead in your little snow cave, Hart. Frozen stiff while I walk into town.
The snow grabbed his boot, and he pitched forward, his pack torn from his shoulders and swallowed by the drift.
The lights! I see the town lights!
There were no lights, only the endless white playing tricks on a dying mind. He crawled on hands and knees, then on his belly, inching toward a promise that would not be kept. Inside the Quingy, Benjamin slept. The candle burned down to a stub. His breath rose in slow, untroubled clouds. The storm battered the dome, but the packed snow only grew thicker, sealing them both in separate graves. Mark's fingers dragged through the powder until they felt nothing, not cold, not pain, only the oncoming dark. And out on the ridge, the last light of town never came. He lay still, and the blizzard howled on. The storm, after its long rage, slowly began to relent. Benjamin woke not to sound, but to its complete absence.
Nothing, not a whisper. The thief has been beaten.
He pressed his hand to the ceiling. The snow was hard as plaster, the crystals fused by the very storm that tried to kill him.
Silas was right. The snow doesn't kill. It only holds still.
The Quinzy had become a buried vault, entombed under feet of packed drift. The cold outside had no way in.
He'd worried about running out of air. But the snow breathes just enough, if you let it.
He sat in the warm pocket of still air and understood for the first time that he would live. 3 miles up the trail, Mark Sutton did not wake. He lay crumpled like a broken doll in the drift. His breath was so shallow it barely misted the air. His lips were blue, his fingers blackening. The man who had mocked sleeping in snow now lay still in its embrace, and the mountain had not yet finished with either of them. Benjamin clawed at the frozen entrance with his bare hands, the packed snow giving way in hard white chunks. Light cracked through, cold and blinding. He wormed through the gap into a world remade. The wind was gone, but so was every familiar landmark. He stood on the buried dome and scanned the ridge. Nothing moved. Not a track, not a wisp of smoke. The land looked like it had never been walked.
Where are they? They should have reached the tree line by now.
Then, halfway to the buried trail, a dark shape broke the flawless white, a glove, frozen solid, its fingers curled inward.
Marks. The patch on the thumb. He'd mended it himself at the campfire.
The leather was stretched from frantic pulling, the lining torn. Mark had fought the storm bare-handed before he lost this. 20 yards beyond, a shattered snowshoe jutted from the drift. Then, a canteen, its strap snapped. The trail was a disaster.
They didn't make it, but maybe one of them is still alive. Even Mark.
He pulled his collar tight and followed the ghost of the trail into the endless white. The mountain had taken enough. The trail led into a shallow draw where the storm had piled the snow waist deep. Benjamin pushed through, each step a fight. Then he saw the horse. It lay on its side, a dark mound, its mane frozen into a solid white crest. The animal's eyes were open, glazed, and the snow around it was trampled in frantic circles. It had died hard.
Mark must have ridden until the horse dropped. Then he walked.
50 yards further, a man-shaped drift caught his eye. An arm jutted upward, fingers still reaching.
Not Mark, one of the others. This one never stood a chance.
He knelt, brushed snow from the frozen face. The man's expression was peaceful, but Benjamin only felt the weight of what was still missing. He scanned the vast white, nothing but the faintest depression of a trail leading north.
You out there, Sutton? Still crawling toward a town that doesn't know you are coming.
Benjamin rose, his own exhaustion pushed aside. Mark was alive until proven otherwise, and the mountain had a debt to pay. Benjamin dropped to his knees beside the crumpled form. He rolled it over and saw the beard full of ice.
Mark, the fool who had jeered loudest, now lay dying in the snow.
His chest still rose, each breath a shallow jerk, but his hands were black, his lips the color of slate.
Not today, Sutton. You don't get to die like this.
He pressed fingers to Mark's neck. The pulse was thready, fading. There was no time to waste. He grabbed the collar of Mark's coat and began to drag him. The snow fought back, clinging to the dead weight. He veered toward a rock outcrop, a dark wedge in the white. It wasn't far, but every yard cost him. He dropped Mark behind the rocks and started piling snow, frantic, the way he'd been taught long ago. His hands were numb, but he packed the snow tight, forcing the crystals to bind. The mound rose. The reversal was complete. The fool who trusted the snow was now the only hope for the man who had mocked him. His breath came in ragged gasps. The mound was half finished, but the cold was stealing his strength.
Pack it tighter. The old man's voice echoed in his skull. Tighter. Every crystal must bind.
He drove his fists into the snow, ignoring the blood that began to freeze on his knuckles. From behind the rocks, Mark let out a low moan, a sound barely human.
Stay with me, Sutton. I am building you a house the blizzard can't knock down.
The mound grew to shoulder height. He began to hollow it, carving a chamber just large enough.
Slow and steady. The walls must arch. The thief can't find a seam.
Night was falling again. The second Quinji took shape against the dark rock, a white dome glowing faintly in the dusk. When the hollow was finished, he dragged Mark inside, the man's dead weight almost too much. He sealed the entrance and lit the last stub of candle. Now the mountain would decide. He pulled his own blanket from his shoulders and wrapped it around Mark. In the cramped dark, he pressed close, sharing what heat remained.
The cold is in my bones too, but he's worse. Keep him alive. The thief won't get another.
He rubbed Mark's blackened fingers, the skin stiff and foreign. Each motion was a prayer against the dark.
You don't get to quit now, Sutton. I didn't drag you through that white hell for nothing.
He cupped Mark's hands and blew steady streams of warm breath into them. The candle flickered but held.
The pulse is still there, thready, weak, but it hasn't stopped. That's enough. That's enough. That's more than the mountain planned.
Outside, the last light vanished. The vent showed only black. They were sealed in with the candle and the cold.
Sleep would kill me, and if I sleep, he dies. Keep watch. Just keep watch.
The hours blurred. Mark's breathing never deepened, but it did not stop. The still air held them both when the first gray seeped through the vent. Benjamin still had his hand on Mark's chest. The heart beat on. The gray light strengthened, and Benjamin fed Mark small scraps of jerky, softened by his own breath.
I am running on fumes myself, but if he doesn't eat, the cold will finish him.
Mark's eyes fluttered, unfocused, then closed. He muttered something about horses and snow.
Easy, Sutton. You are inside now. The storm can't reach us.
He pressed the last of the jerky between Mark's lips, then drew his blanket closer around them both.
Sharing heat means my own body will cool faster. But alone, he wouldn't last an hour.
The day passed in a half-sleep. Benjamin checked the candle, the walls, the faint pulse. By dusk, Mark's breathing had steadied, though his skin remained gray. Benjamin allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction.
He's not out of the woods, but the thief hasn't won yet.
The second night fell, and Benjamin kept his promise, staying awake, sharing warmth, guarding the man who once called him a fool. The second morning broke cold and clear. A sliver of light stabbed through the vent, and Mark's eyes opened fully for the first time in 2 days. He blinked at the curved white walls, disoriented.
Where am I? This isn't the trail.
It's my snow cave, Sutton. The one I built while you were running. The one you said would be my grave.
Snow. I am alive because of snow?
Benjamin said it flatly, without triumph. He just sat back and let the words sink into the frozen air, the same air that had saved them both.
You dragged me here, built another one.
I did. And the snow did the rest, just like I told you it would.
But the others, Charles, I left them. How can you be alive?
Benjamin let out a slow breath. He looked at the candle stub, then back at Mark. The silence stretched. Mark closed his eyes. The weight of his own mockery, once shouted into the blizzard, now sat on his chest heavier than any drift. He didn't speak, but the silence was answer enough. Benjamin shifted closer and examined Mark's hands. The frostbite was deep, the skin waxen and purple. He wrapped them in dry strips of torn blanket.
The frostbite is deep. You might lose some fingers, but you are alive.
How? How does this work? The snow cave. It's still freezing in here.
Packed snow traps, still air. Your body heat warms that air to near freezing. Outside, it's 30 below.
Mark listened, the counterintuitive logic sinking in. The very thing he had mocked was now cradling him.
The real killer is moving air, the wind. It strips heat fast. In here, no wind. The snow holds it back.
You knew this. You knew it all along. And I called you a fool.
Benjamin looked away, a flicker of old pain crossing his face. The candle flame dipped for a breath, then steadied.
Where'd you learn this? Not from any trapper I know.
Benjamin hesitated, the name on his tongue. He owed the truth, but the weight of the town's cruelty pressed against his chest. Benjamin drew a slow breath. The name was a wound he'd carried for years, but now it was the only truth left.
I learned it from a man named Silas, an old guide. He showed me how to build a shelter from snow.
The name hung in the cold air, a ghost from days the town had tried to bury.
Silas, the old Indian, he was run off years ago.
Mark's whisper was barely audible, the recognition hitting him like a blow.
Yes, he taught a young trapper what his own people refused to learn.
Mark closed his eyes and his jaw tightened. He didn't speak. Benjamin let the silence stretch. There was nothing else to add. The candle flickered between them, and the weight of old sins pressed down. Silas's name had been spoken, and now it could not be taken back. The memory rose unbidden. Silas on a ridgeline, his voice patient as he drew a dome in the snow for a boy who had nothing but a worn coat.
Silas never asked for payment. He only said the snow would remember those who respected it.
Mark shifted, his stiff fingers twitching against the blanket. He saw the crowd again, and his own voice among them. 3 winters ago, the town had run Silas off. Men with rifles, words sharp as axes, and Mark had jeered with the rest. Silas had not fought, he simply turned, his dignity a silence that shamed the shouting men more than any bullet could.
He taught me anyway, after the town threw stones. He said the snow doesn't hate. It only waits.
I was there! I shouted with the others.
Benjamin didn't answer. He just looked at Mark, and the silence carried all the judgment the snow dome had spared them. Mark closed his eyes. The guide's name was now a debt he could never repay, and the snow dome became a monument to that debt. The storm had passed, but the true reckoning had only just begun. Mark finally broke the heavy silence, his voice a raw scrape in the cold air.
You should have left me out there after what I did. After what we all did. I deserved the storm.
Silas would have saved you. He would have saved any of us, even the ones who threw stones.
Those words hit Mark harder than any blow. He leaned his head back against the snow wall and let out a long, shuddering breath.
Silas, he was a better man than all of us. And I never even learned his full name.
He never needed you to know his full name. He only needed you to know the snow.
Mark raised his bound hands and stared at them. The frostbite was a map of his own cruelty, written in flesh.
I'll carry his name now. Silas, even if I lose every finger, I'll speak it to anyone who will listen.
Benjamin didn't reply. He simply reached over and adjusted the blanket on Mark's shoulders, a quiet act of solidarity. The snow dome, built by a lesson from an exile, now held 2 survivors in its fragile peace, and the thief could not enter. The day passed in quiet rest. Benjamin's strength slowly returned, and Mark's frostbitten hands, though stiff and blackened, began to move again.
Storm's gone. We need to move while the day holds.
They dug at the entrance, the packed snow surrendering in hard white chunks. Fresh air rushed in, sharp and clean. The world outside was blinding. Endless white stretched toward the valley, where a distant smudge of smoke marked the town.
That's where we owe our lives. Both of us.
Silas's house.
The trail was long, but the snow had settled, and the sky was clear. They began the slow walk toward the smoke. Benjamin kept his pace steady, supporting Mark's weight. The Quingy shrank behind them, a white hump on an endless plain.
I won't forget Hart, not ever.
Benjamin said nothing, but his grip on Mark's shoulder tightened. The town was still miles away, but they would reach it. The main street lay buried under fresh snow, and the first villagers who saw Benjamin and Mark stumbled backward as if looking at ghosts.
Don't stare. Help or don't. But know this, Hart saved my life. He built a snow cave, and it held.
An old trapper named Crowell spat and shook his head. A younger woman grabbed her child and whispered something. Mark's voice, though hoarse, carried down the street. More heads turned, and the murmur grew. He limped forward, refusing the hands that reached out, and kept speaking, his frost-bitten fingers gesturing vaguely.
The storm was a killer. The snow was not. Hart knew that.
A murmur rippled through the crowd. They had all thought Benjamin dead for sure, and Mark along with him. By the time the sun climbed above the ridge, most of the town had gathered in the muddy thoroughfare.
You mocked him for sleeping in snow. Now I am standing here because of it.
A question hung in the cold air, unspoken but heavy. Where had the quiet trapper learned such a secret? Benjamin finally spoke, his voice quiet, but carrying across the silent street.
I didn't learn it on my own. An old guide named Silas showed me years ago.
The name rippled through the crowd. A few old-timers shifted uneasily, their eyes dropping.
He taught me the snow. He gave me the gift. I just used it.
Mark nodded slowly, his bandaged hands resting in his lap. The movement said more than any word. The townspeople exchanged glances. Silas, the name they had buried under scorn.
You drove him out, but his knowledge saved 2 of your own.
No one spoke. The wind chose that moment to die completely. In the quiet, Silas's name settled into the town like a seed waiting for spring. Mark kept his eyes closed, committing the moment to memory. The Quingy stood through the winter, a white sentinel on the empty ridge. Inside, the candle had guttered to nothing. The walls were slick with melt, but they had done their work. Then the thaw came. The dome shrank, its crystals releasing the water they had borrowed. A single wild flower pierced the snow where the entrance had been. It was small, yellow, the color of the candle that had burned inside. The lesson did not melt with the snow. It lingered in the still air of the valley. Silas had once said, "The snow does not forget." And it didn't. The man who was driven away had left a gift that outlasted the storm, and every spring the ridge would remember. Not the storm, but the stillness. Not the cold, but the life it had saved.